They should have decided much earlier that Biden
Yes.
wasn't up to running and
Yes, it was.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we're on.
had a normal primary.
They did have a normal primary. Biden was doing just fine.
No, they did not.
Well, they didn't have a primary for Harris, but they had normal primaries, and Biden was doing just fine. He was doing.
They didn't have a they didn't have they didn't have a they didn't have a selection for who was the candidates and if Biden was there and who might be competing against him
There was a
for
guy,
the nomination.
Dean something or another.
He automatically was going to have the presidency to run for, and nobody else had a challenge.
By the way,
I
in 2020, how many people challenged Trump? The incumbent president is almost always crowned. The one time I can remember that there was a serious primary challenge was Ted Kennedy against Carter, and the net result was that Reagan ran away with it. So people kind of learned if you're going to challenge, if you're going to go after the king, you got to kill him. And nobody was in a position to kill Trump in 2020, so they didn't bother. 2024, there were a few people who tried, and it was unsuccessful. But why are you asking the Democrats to replay a very poor decision from 30 years ago?
But
Well,
I would have
25.
I would still advocate for I would have I would have liked to have Harris go through the primary circuit, then go through selection that way, and that way she would have been able to go through the fire, so to say, and figured out what actually resonates with people, and on her own, rather than take the some of the already half-baked things and bring it to people, and they did not resonate well. Although she did, but you give her the credit that within those 113 days, she was able to garner enough votes, enough electoral votes to really get a lot of votes, even with those 113 days. So I still give her that credit that she was able to do something, but she needed more time.
I, I agree. What would have happened uh, if Biden, instead of saying, "Hey, I'm dropping out," let's say he would have died? Should should anything have been different? Let's say instead of 113 days before the election, it was 60 days or 50. At some point, you take what you have and you go with it.
Well, that's what happened. But at the same time, Biden himself could have said, "Okay, 1 year ago, he could have said, primary is over, but I'm going to abdicate and let Harris run with it." So he could have done that. But obviously, at that time, there was not much of that push from the leadership council or whatever that was to throw him over the cliff.
Right. If the debate had gone differently, I don't
Bobby,
think
you're going to give Paul a chance to say anything?
no.
I've been thinking about it, and it, the debate probably would have gone much differently if he hadn't been so sick. And
Yes.
but his performance during the debate was so bad. Trump's performance was atrocious also. He never answered any of the questions he was asked. He just went off. They'd ask him a question, and he'd say, "But first I want to talk about," and he'd spend the whole time talking about something different. Um, you know, Trump is an individual with a below average IQ. If you listen to him, he has a below average IQ. he repeats things. He talks about things that are untrue all the time, and you know, he's able to generate a lot of support by some of the things that he says. He lies all the time. You have
Doesn't
to admit
lie
that.
all the time.
Oh,
That's what
he
go
lies
back to what I
all the
said
time, every day.
when I mentioned earlier that I like to you talk about pet peeves. That's one of my pet peeves. People, in your case, Paul, that exaggerates. He doesn't lie all the time, and you're exaggerating the situation just by doing that. And you're refusing even to agree that he's saying he's lying, and in fact you're lying, saying he's lying all the time. I mean, it's crazy.
I don't think.
Can I say one item here? The whether he lies or not, see, I think that is is overlooked by common folk, a common voter, because they are listening to the entire message and ignore a whole bunch of things because they like the guy the way his whatever he says resonates with them. That's all. And then rest just flies up the thing. Then that's it. And they like the person that way. So I don't think you can actually quantify and label the person as a person with low IQ, given that he has won the election and he's going to be the president come 2025.
Yes. Well,
I think many Democrats are just poor losers.
unlike Donald Trump. With Donald Trump, he can't be a poor loser because he never admitted he ever lost anything.
Well, I don't dispute that he's a poor loser.
Okay.
But that's his right to be that.
I suppose, except when it gets in the way of
That's why
democracy.
That's why I say he lies all the time.
Well, let me
Why is
throw
it-
out something that we can, I think, agree is a lie, and he knows or should know that it's a lie, but he repeated it. The cats and dogs and pets, which he talked about in the Harris debate. Okay, somebody told him this was happening. He thought it was cool, so he mentioned it. Then everybody involved, including the person who started the whole thing with a post on Facebook, said it's not true. And he continued to say it. I think that's the definition of a lie. Everything else
if
you
in
can
fact-
say he's ignorant, he whatever. But when you know something isn't true and you keep saying it, that's a lie.
Oh, I wouldn't dispute that if that's the case. So that's one.
Oh, well, that's the
I
most
think I
obvious.
I don't I don't think that means that's everything he says is a lie.
Well, not. I think everything is probably an exaggeration, and I don't
you
think
think
he's
you
got a
gotta tell
below
Paul
average
that.
IQ. I think he's lazy as sin. Being lazy in the same way, I'm sympathetic. But
Who's lazy?
me and
No, but
and
who
Trump,
are you comparing yourself to?
I'm comparing myself to most of the people I know.
Oh, I thought you were comparing yourself to Trump. That's why I
No,
asked.
I'm saying we are of similar mind. We'd rather take the easy way out.
I see. Okay, I can understand that.
Yeah. And I don't think he's below average IQ. I think he's lazy, so he takes the easy way out. And if the easy way out is working, then he'd be a fool to do anything else.
See, one point here is if his statement about cats and dogs being eaten was actually working with his voter base, why is he going to not continue saying that? And it's kind of interesting analysis there. That although it may be a lie, he knows it works. Hey, keep saying that. Bring more people in. That's it.
Right.
And if this is we think this is a bad rope, it's broken rope, but the rope is working for him. So why not use it? In an election campaign, lies don't matter, I guess.
Well, I guess it depends upon who you who you tell the lies to, number one, and who is sitting counting all the lies. Unfortunately, I think that the Democrats assumed that the American public would look and say, how can I trust all these things he's saying because I know X, Y, and Z aren't true. And evidently, the American public, as you were pointing out, didn't care.
Yes, because a lot of stuff
I would,
general public ignores. They want the solution. They want a global solution, which helps me. And at least there's a promise that things are going to work out, and people go with it. And if they may not work out, they will basically say, "Okay, we didn't work out. What can I do?"
Yeah, then I'll switch the next time. One of the things I think we'll talk about in a little while is maybe there won't be a next time. But right now, I think there are a number of things that the Democrats did poorly, very poorly. One of the things I mentioned earlier before we went on air, in 2020, we were in the middle of a pandemic. People were huddled in their houses. Kids couldn't go to school. People didn't have jobs in many cases. And when Trump said, are you better off now than you were in 2020? And people said, oh, yeah, I was better off in 2020. The Democrats did not point out and pound on the head, there was a pandemic worldwide, by the way, and we were doing worse than any other major country. And Trump had developed a vaccine or promoted the developing of vaccine, which is very important, but then he didn't do anything to distribute it. He didn't do anything to provide gear to medical personnel, among others, so that they could avoid getting sick themselves. And his response, which frosts me to this day, was, I'm not a pharmacist. This isn't my problem. Go bid. New York, go bid against Illinois for surgical masks, as opposed to the federal government buying them and distributing them. So if this had been pointed out over and over and over again, maybe some of the people who sat out might have said, well, what happens when the next pandemic comes? Particularly now that we have RFK Jr., who doesn't believe in any of this crap, going to be the point person.
that's a lie. That's a lie right there. You're saying he doesn't believe in any of this crap. There may be some things he doesn't believe that you're talking about that's legit.
Yeah.
But there's many other things that what he's talking about is common sense and very valid. So you're lying right there by making that statement.
I'm listening to what he says, and among other things,
that's not what he says.
He says that he wants to get rid of a lot of the things in public health.
Okay, he may have said that. That's a lot of things. That's not everything, and you're implying everything.
Well, you're absolutely right. I have a tendency to exaggerate, unlike the Republican president of the United States. But you're right. I should know better.
You should.
Yes. But I do know that a lot of the things that I consider important, he wants RFK Jr. wants to get rid of.
You want to tell us one of those things?
Huh?
Want to tell us one of those things?
Well, one of the obvious things, he's trying to get rid of most, if not all, vaccines, because And he's right. There are occasional people who have problems with those vaccines.
What's the average amount of vaccines a child receives?
I don't know anymore. My kid's 52.
How many?
My kid is 52, so I don't know what kids get anymore. But I think I remember that she got 7 or 8.
Uh-huh.
I don't know whether that's
Do you
high or
know how
low.
many, Paul?
I'm sorry?
Do you know how many vaccines a young child receives very early in their age?
I don't know, maybe
Bob is saying
6 to
around 7.
15?
Okay, 15. What do you think, Almanan? You're in the medical field.
I could not give you a good number, but it's a good bunch of vaccines. But the reason the reason that the children are given vaccines is to protect them from diseases because of which they used to die, and so there are no other solutions.
So
for
you're
those
saying all these
diseases.
vaccines are necessary?
Yes, they
I
are
certainly
necessary.
think the
Otherwise,
polio one was.
And it was fairly successful. Oh, by the way,
My
smallpox wasn't too bad either.
My well, I don't know what all the individual ones are. My understanding, it's well over 60.
I don't think there is that 60 number does not sound right to me.
Okay, I'm being conservative.
I don't.
I want you. Please
I
look
don't
that up
think
for me.
I
will
have
you?
had 60 in my life.
I'm not talking about you. I'm
No,
talking
no,
about
no.
young children.
I'm saying if a kid, a child, has 60 as a child, either they've invented a whole bunch of vaccines that I didn't have, or that's a big number. I personally have had probably 7 or 8 in the last 5 years.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe what I came up saying that out there, I'll put it out there right now that maybe I'm wrong, but
Okay.
I think I'm right.
I think 60 does not sound right to me.
Okay, that's fine, but you're going to check and find out in your sources.
Yes, I'm going to find out.
Not now. You're going to take a valuable time right now,
I can see him working on the computer as we speak.
but I'm not sure
Which-
how valid whatever information
Okay,
he's pulling
Chuck.
up for the moment is.
Which of the, let's say for the moment there are 60 that a kid gets, including boosters. Which ones are bad? He should
I
not
don't
be
know.
taking.
I don't know. I didn't do research on this. It's just something I came across, and I'm just throwing it out there. That's what I heard. Maybe I'm wrong. I've said that,
Okay.
but I'd like to find out what other people may be able to be aware of. And I think you're saying 7, or whoever said something else. Maybe you don't necessarily know if that's the right number either.
Right. I'm trying to remember.
You seem to be
75
very, very on the low number.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm off by being on the high number.
Well, let's assume for the moment 60 is right. Again, what vaccinations should be eliminated? Because that's really the key.
We don't have time. We don't have time to talk about that, Bob, because we have
Okay.
no facts
Yeah.
to be able to back up my statement or your statement.
But what I'm again going to say, I don't remember the exact number, but I don't think it is 60.
Okay, that's fine.
But what I'm going to still say is that the vaccines that are given to children are not really meant to be an exercise in trivial exercise. It is actually to protect the children from being from dying and getting sick because of all the infections they are prone to, and because of that, because of all these vaccines, we see child infant mortality has actually decreased considerably, and naturally more and more children live to be adults unless they get struck by a motor vehicle or something. So
That's what you've heard.
Yes.
That's what you read. You can't prove that right now.
But I don't have to prove it because
okay, so you're just making a statement. That's fine. That's all I made.
yeah.
Chuck, you're doing
So we got a few
exactly.
things to check out. We got to check out what's the death rate of young children nowadays compared to before, and how the United States ranks within the world for child early
Mortality.
death.
Because
But you're throwing out a statement and saying that your statement is valid as Paul's statement is. It's the same kind of thing as.
Oh, I didn't say it was valid. I just said that's a statement. I gave a number, and I'm saying I'm leaving it as an open question. That's what I believe. I'm not saying that it's true. I think it might be true, but I'd like to check it out and have you guys check out on your side and see what we can come up with.
Where did you
Because you're
get this
saying
information?
all these vaccines are necessary.
yes,
And at the same time, I'm not so sure they're all necessary. Maybe some of these pharmaceutical companies are taking advantage of people. And I think that's somewhat what Kennedy is alluding to.
well, you do need pharmaceutical companies to manufacture.
Who's ever making the vaccines, who's ever involved in it,
Yeah, but
whether it be Fauci or somebody else.
forget Fauci. Well, I'm just going to let you know that the way the vaccines are produced is there is usually several years of research has to be done in a lab. Then some other company takes it over to manufacture, and then it has to be tested on people, and then eventually, if approved, it's given to people. But what happens is vaccines were developed and have been developed and continue to be developed against diseases that usually are killers. That's why there are vaccines.
Have there ever been any vaccines that were given to people in general and turned out to be a major mistake?
Well, one of the vaccines in 70s, we got a vaccine that was an influenza vaccine, and we got, because of that, there was some the way it was prepared, and the incidence of Guillain-Barré syndrome increased. That's why when you go and get a influenza vaccine now, they ask you, have you ever had a Guillain-Barré syndrome after or before any time? But that is the legacy from the 70s. But it was one time that there was something, I don't know I don't remember the details now, what had gone wrong.
Well, I just had a booster for for the flu, and there was a list of things that I had to check off,
Yes.
having to do with medical history and allergies, because some vaccines have things that there's known allergies for. So, and that comes out, I believe, Omanon would know better than I, that comes out during the testing.
Yes, because we know. So, for example, a person, if you are getting a vaccine that is what is called a live virus vaccine, you can't give it to people who are immunocompromised. So that if you are immunocompromised, you have to get a vaccine that is with the virus that is already compromised, that's already dead, so that you still get the immune response. Maybe it's a little less, but you will still get the protection from the influenza, but in comparison to live vaccine, where the protection is better. But you cannot give that to everybody because of immunocompromised situation in some individuals.
Well, I do know that there are people who were allergic to something to do with the measles vaccine. There was some, I thought, relatively large percentage, 5–10%, who could not take the measles vaccine, and they relied on the fact that nobody around them had measles, so they would not be exposed.
Yes,
And,
that's why that's why the herd immunity is important.
Right. And now that people are stopping to take the measles vaccine, they're getting not quite epidemics yet, but tremendous increases in the number of people with measles.
Yes, and that is, you get those pockets and pockets of population where you get increased incidence of measles, and something has to be done there.
So, in any case, we could talk a little bit more about this stuff, but as long as we're talking about nominees, I'm wondering if someone other than me is bothered by many of the Trump nominees for positions.
I mean, you have, for example, Tulsi Gabbard.
Right.
She is supposed to be the intelligence czar, I guess, and but I don't know whether she has any intelligence experience. But she's going to deal with it, I guess.
Well, she does not have any formal stuff through the government, that I know, and.
I'm bothered by Gates.
Well, I was going to wait on that.
Now, you know, he's never he is a lawyer, but he's never actually tried anything. You know, he doesn't have any experience doing that. It's and his private life is not, you know, it's very questionable. Questionable is probably the best adjective I could give. I mean, he's been accused of, you know, going after underage teenage women for sexual favors. He's taken.
So since he's been accused, he must be guilty in your mind.
I don't know that he's necessarily guilty. I do know that there was someone
I wasn't talking
who,
to you, Bob.
Well, yeah. Let me pass on a piece of information that we may have forgotten. There was one of his partners was going to testify against him for shopping a 17-year-old for sex. And he publicly said he was going to testify and then withdrew his testimony.
That's never happened before in any cases.
Never happened before. Occasionally, not necessarily all the time.
I didn't say all the time.
When somebody does that, it's because they have either been threatened or bribed.
But in being a devil's advocate, you can say that the Justice Department did not prosecute him, so he's clear, right?
At the moment,
yes.
yeah.
So that way, to Chuck's point, he was accused, but he was cleared. So in that case, what is holding him back?
Well, there's another piece of information. There was a congressional ethics investigation on these very topics that was finished yesterday or today or something like that. We don't know the results of it, but because he resigned from Congress a little prematurely because because he's been nominated to be Attorney General, they closed the investigation because what were they going to do? Make him resign? But if the report comes out, which supposedly was in the process of being developed, maybe it will be reopened, or at least in the public domain it'll be reopened, if not legally.
Okay, so there's one person you have an issue with. Who else you have issues with?
Gabbard, I'm not overjoyed with because she has, in the past, by the way, before anybody talked about her being in the intelligence community, had somewhat questionable relationships with Assad of Syria and Russia, and she is questioned, maybe correctly, maybe not. I don't have enough data to make a decision on my own, the validity of the intelligence community. And then you say, I'm going to put you in charge of it, not so much in charge of the development of the information, but the filtering of the information to pass along, which means she's not in charge of voting, of the voting process. She's in charge of counting the votes. I think we know just common sense that the person who counts the votes is the most important.
I think in the eyes, in my perspective, it doesn't matter. I'm not sure about Omanon, but I don't think either you or Paul. It didn't matter who they suggest, who they nominate. You're going to have an issue with that, whoever they are, unless they're a Democrat.
Marco Rubio.
What about Marco Rubio?
He's been nominated as Secretary of State, and basically I haven't really heard, and I've listened to a variety of news sources in the past couple of days, anything particularly negative about him. They say, yeah, he's got the background, he's got the information, and he was one of the first, so it wasn't like, oh, he's so much better than all these other clowns. He was, when they nominated him, he said, yeah, okay. Might have preferred somebody else, but okay.
Yeah, there's not much about him, so that's a good point there.
So it's not that everybody nominated; it's the people recently. The guy who was a captain, he happened to be a decorated captain in the Marines or the Army, who's now been nominated to be Secretary of Defense. He has no management experience, and he's dealing with a couple million people that he's going to be in charge of. So, you know, there are a variety of questionable ones. I think the most questionable is Gates.
But you got to also think about that. Doesn't matter who he recommends. Given their qualifications and given that there is Senate majority and majority in the House, so there should be no problem in getting them through.
It's going to be even easier because according to Scott, who lost for majority leader of the Senate, he said that all three of the candidates for majority leader had agreed that whoever won would put the Senate in recess so that Trump could essentially appoint anybody who wanted to any position.
When did he say that? Today?
Scott said it a couple of days ago before the vote.
So he's prior to the vote of who was going to be in charge?
Yeah, there were three guys going to be in
Senate?
charge, and according to Scott, I did hear, I don't know about the other two for sure, but according to Scott, all three agreed that whoever was the victor would agree to put the Senate in recess so that the recess appointments could be done.
Okay, I'm gonna look. I haven't heard anything. I haven't heard anything about that. What you're saying may be correct. I don't know, but
Okay.
I have to do what I can do to see if I can find that statement.
But even if there's a recess appointment, doesn't that mean they have to come back and get them confirmed?
No.
I don't
No?
think so.
A recess appointment is a recess appointment. It's an appointment while the Senate is in recess. So
You're certain about that, Paul, right?
I thought they eventually
that's
have to
what the
be
television
confirmed.
says.
Right. I know
What's
they
that?
don't have to go through the normal confirmation process. What I'm not sure about is if there needs to be an up or down vote to confirm the recess appointment. That I'm not sure of.
I thought there was, but
Yeah.
could be wrong.
I've heard both, and I remember back when this first came up, when it was first agreed that they could do that, there was something where essentially you had you could do whatever was necessary. And the logic was you couldn't have a big department without leadership.
I totally different subject in a way. I just curiosity.
Okay.
What was the vote in the since the three of you from Burlington? What was the vote in Burlington as far as how many people voted for Trump versus voting for Harris? Do you, any of you know?
No,
I was told by someone who knows more than I do that the majority of Burlington voted for Harris. Burlington's a relatively conservative town, so
I'm just curious. None of the three of you were curious enough to see exactly what your other citizens in Burlington how they voted.
I didn't get an exact count, no, but I
Okay.
was told that.
I was too depressed over the news to investigate.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was B News, which is the Burlington cable news service that indicated that a majority of Burlington voted for Harris.
But as far as I know, majority means about 60%.
60%?
60%, I think, voted for Harris, and maybe 40 or 45. I don't know the exact number. It's around that number.
Around that
they
number,
voted for
okay.
Trump.
I got a listing in central Massachusetts. There's 62 towns or cities in central Massachusetts, including the city of Gardner that I'm in, which is about a city of about 25,000. Worcester, which is the second largest city in Massachusetts, is part of central Mass.
Right.
So of the 62 cities and towns, 31 voted for Trump and 31 voted for Harris. I
Okay.
thought that was pretty interesting.
That's interesting.
Now, individually, I mean, from a percentage point of view, if you took the actual count of the individual citizens in each of those towns, Harris would have got ended up with the most votes.
Okay.
Because there were the larger communities like Worcester voted for her, and Worcester's got I don't know if it's 150, 200,000 people or whatever. So the individual count, but percentage-wise, it was a very even split.
Actually, I'm a little surprised that it was even. I would have thought a little more towards Trump because central and western Massachusetts tend to be more conservative.
Well, I thought that was a pretty, I don't know.
I'm surprised, but okay. I know Boston, which is obviously bigger than anybody else in the area, was solidly for Harris. So
That's not surprising. It's a very liberal city for the most part.
I remember. I've been around a long time. I remember when busing was an issue. It wasn't so liberal
busing?
then. Yeah. So yeah, but I'm not surprised that the Northeast, which by the way, I think Maine eventually went for Harris.
They all voted for Harris.
Okay.
All the New England states, including New York
Right.
and New Jersey, all voted for Harris.
Right.
And all the West Coast states also voted for Harris.
Right.
And there were two states, Arizona and maybe New Mexico, I can't be sure, also voted for Harris. Otherwise, I think every other state.
I think
was for
Arizona eventually went Trump. It was a very small margin, but I think because I remember at one point they were saying in the news that all of the 7 battleground states eventually went for Trump.
That's correct.
That would mean that Nevada and Arizona went for Trump.
They were colored yellow for a long time, actually. But I don't know what happened in the end. And you say that they both went for Trump? I don't know.
Yeah, the 7 battleground states did.
Okay.
And,
Which, again, very surprising. And Paul was saying a bunch of people didn't want to vote for a woman for president. I'm sure being African American didn't help as well. I think ignoring the whole COVID thing, was a problem. I think the Democrats assumed that everybody hated Trump to such an extent that that and abortion would carry the show, and obviously it did not. I was listening this afternoon on the way home from some errands, and they were interviewing this one Puerto Rican guy who was saying he hated the Puerto Rican garbage thing, but he liked Trump himself, and the economy was so bad that he had to vote for that.
But their vote does not count for the electoral vote, right?
Oh no, he was in the lower 48.
Oh, okay, all right.
He was a Puerto Rican background. The moment somebody from Puerto Rico moves to one of the lower 48 and registered, they can now vote.
Okay. Yes.
I have no idea what the island of Puerto Rico did. That might be interesting to find out, because maybe they didn't care either.
Yeah, I mean, when you are looking at again, I assume that a lot of stuff what Trump said got ignored, and because his core messages surfaced to the top, that resonated, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what counts for the general public, and who would not?
Well, maybe again, Paul said a bunch of Democrats stayed home, and it begins to look that way because the numbers.
Yeah. Trump got the same number, basically the same number of votes he had 4 years ago, and the number of Democratic votes was a lot less.
So I mean, Paul, there's no way anybody can prove that unless they talk to everybody, every single person. I mean, many of those Democrats may have in fact voted for Trump, and that's why their numbers were down.
So,
but the numbers of voters for Trump, Paul is saying, was the same.
Well, that just might have been a coincidence. That may not. That doesn't. I don't think that proves anything. I mean, the people could have just, like I say, some of the people that voted for Trump in the past, I'm sure some of them voted for Harris, and I'm sure some of the people that are Democrats voted for Trump. We don't know who they are, and it's just speculation on why it happened to come out the way it did in numbers. That's why I speculated earlier that there may have been some hanky panky with the voter count the previous election, but I can't prove it, and it's water over the dam. It's water over the dam now for this election, and I'm hopeful. I'm an independent. I vote Republican most of the time, and I'm just hopeful that Trump will come through on most of the things he's talking about. If he doesn't, then he should be voted out. If they can come up with a decent enough candidate to I know he can't be voted out because he can only serve a term.
He's out.
But the Republicans would be out on the next election unless the Democrats can't come up with a better candidate than somebody like Harris. I can't possibly believe Harris will be a candidate for the next cycle.
They have to have a better message. That's number one.
Right.
And then you can have a robot.
Well,
let me ask you a question. Since Trump made a big deal out of being a dictator.
Being a what?
A dictator.
He made a big deal about being dictator?
Yes.
yes.
He said he'd be a dictator
times.
he said he'd be a dictator on day one.
Right.
And you think he's going to give it up on day two?
Yes.
Oh,
he doesn't.
please.
He was just trying to be funny by saying he's going to impose back with oil production and so forth. So on day one, I'm going to be the dictator to make this happen, or maybe something else. But that's all he's talking about.
Well, given
That's
People
pretty
are
naive.
reading. What?
That's pretty naive.
Well, I'm not but naive, Paul, on that. I think I would question your naivety to believe that that's what he's planning on being dictator all long term.
I believe Trump when he talks.
You told me before he lies all the time.
Right, he does lie, but I
But you
believe
told me
when he
all the
says
time he
what he
lies.
wants to do, I
You told me
believe
he lies all the
I
time.
believe.
So he must have been lying about being a dictator, and you believed it.
Chuck, if in fact
What?
he convinces the Senate to go into recess so he can appoint.
So has he done that?
He's not president yet.
He's not
I
president.
know. So he
and,
couldn't have done it.
And oh, by the way, the Senate is still controlled by the Democrats. Come January
But
20.
they're not going to be voting on the candidates.
No, because they can't vote on the candidates till they're proposed by the president, and the president is Biden. But January 20th, and I think that's still the date.
Correct.
Okay, then Trump will, in fact, be president, and if at some point in the first month or two there's a recess and Trump appoints a whole bunch of people, will you believe that he's being a dictator?
No, I
Oh.
would believe that he's pulling
A fast one?
he's taking advantage of what within the rules he can do. I guess I wouldn't be happy about him doing that. But that's
Okay.
not the sign. I mean, he's welding his powers in whichever way he's allowed to do so.
I agree. And part of what scares me is he's found that he can do an awful lot of things that everybody assumed to be illegal, because it turns out there is no penalty if you do them.
Well, just like the Democrats have taken advantage of many things over the years.
Yes, I will give you that they have, but
Yeah,
less so
okay.
than Trump. I think Trump is smart enough, or at least surrounding himself with enough smart people to find some of these cracks in the system and do it.
Well, those cracks in the system have worked against Trump in the past during his previous administration.
Not so much.
And the
Well, yeah,
Democrats took advantage of many things.
when Trump, this goes back a long time, when Trump held up aid that was intended for Ukraine without telling anybody he was doing it, and then called Zelensky and said, "Do me a favor, and I'll give you the aid." That was illegal. Now
I'm
he was.
I'm not aware what you're saying is what actually happened, so I can't comment on that.
Well, it's
I'll
what
look it up,
happened, and
but-
that's why he got impeached the first time.
Well, I'd like you to be able to furnish that information to me if you can find it.
Okay.
It happened during the inquest, during the impeachment inquest.
Well, I'm just asking to furnish that information to me.
I'll see what I can
You
find.
can just
and
tell
send
me
it to
where
you.
I can find it.
I'll try to send you some links.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do you think about the success of MSNBC? They're in big trouble. They're cutting a lot of people out.
NBC is.
And unfortunately, it sounds like CNN is in a little bit, not as much trouble, but they're having their difficulties too. Both cable network stations have lost a lot of their audience.
Yes, and Fox, this I'm less sure of. The other two I know factually is true. But Fox is, I think, going to be letting some people go as well, because the model of cable TV isn't working as well as it did. There's so many other sources of information.
Fox's numbers are up.
Relatively, yeah, but their income is down. And it's not the numbers that's important, it's the income. It's a business.
Social media has taken over, actually, because individuals are setting up their own YouTube channels, and next thing you know, they are draining the viewers towards them.
Oh yeah, Joe Rogan gave Harris an opportunity to speak for 3 hours, and she wouldn't agree to do more than an hour. That cost her
Why, if you're going to talk for an hour in an unfriendly environment,
3 hours.
But he offered her 3, could have offered her 10 for whatever
I
reason.
mean,
And I'm not
that's his policy.
hypothesize.
That's it. My understanding, that's his policy. He interviews everybody for 3 hours for the most part.
Okay.
So it wasn't special one way or the other. Trump did 3 hours with him.
Right. And maybe
And whether
Harris
or not
had a
whether or not-
scheduling
and I think
issue.
most people would say Joe Rogan is fairly fair to both sides.
I don't know. I do know that I had lunch with a cousin of mine who's in her 30s, and she was telling me that Joe Rogan is somebody that people listen to.
That's right. Millions is the number one podcast in the country.
Okay.
I think the numbers I've heard are around 15 million people.
And she talked to him for an hour, and that
Who
was.
talked to her an hour?
You said Harris talked to him for an hour.
No, she said she would do it, but she would only do it for an hour. He said that's not acceptable. You do 3 hours at my studio. She wanted 1 hour at her convenience, and he said no deal.
Okay. She was running
So
for president
she probably
all over the
lost to
nation.
voters by taking that position.
Maybe she made a mistake. Maybe she should have done it for 3 hours. Maybe she didn't have 3 hours. One of the
Well, that's
things
because she hasn't got enough answers to cover 3 hours.
it's not. I mean, you could do the Trump and use the same answer for everything. But maybe again, if you do a postmortem, which by the way is what is kind of the interesting stuff that's going on right now in the Democratic Party. What happened? Maybe that was something that would have made a difference. Whether it would have made a difference in getting how many 5 or 6 million people who didn't vote this time who voted the last time, I don't know. But maybe it's a whole bunch of things, and that was a key piece. I can't say. I do know going to.
As I said earlier, we don't know how many of those. Well, you said what, 4 or 5 million people? A certain portion of those 4 or 5 million people voted for Trump.
Yeah, understood. The one fact we
If-
have is the
time
total
out,
number of voters.
Time out.
Yeah.
If
Time
a
out,
certain
time
number
out.
of those 4 or 5 million people voted for Trump, okay, then he lost that same number, either didn't vote for him at all, or because he got the same number of votes.
Yeah, I know.
He got the same
And some-
number
I
of
said-
votes in both elections.
I said earlier that some of the people that previously had voted for Trump, I'm sure voted for Harris.
And it may well be, but what we do know with absolute certainty was 5
Nothing
million
certain.
less people voted this time than last time, even though there were more eligible voters this time than last time. That means a whole bunch of people stayed home. Or, one other possibility, a whole bunch of people's votes were not counted. And if a whole bunch of people's votes were not counted, assuming, which I don't think is true, but let's assume for the moment that that's the case, then it was a whole bunch of Democratic votes that weren't counted because Trump got the same number of votes 2020 and 2024. So I would think from your standpoint, you'd go along with Paul's idea that a bunch of people stayed home.
I don't know that.
No,
No,
Well,
that's
we know
speculation.
that-
You may be. It's speculation. It might be true, but I'm not convinced on that. I don't know anybody that stayed home personally.
Do you believe the total number of votes in 2020 and the total number of votes in 2024?
I didn't understand what you just said.
There's a number, the total number of votes in 2020, which was somewhere about 155 million. Does that sound right?
It sounds about right. Yeah.
Okay, and in 2024, there was about 150 million because Trump got the same number as he got before, and Harris got less votes
Then
than
Biden.
Trump did. and a whole lot less than Biden did. And the third parties were not 5 million votes. So a bunch of people did not vote, or a bunch of people's votes were not counted. Take your choice. Those are the only two explanations.
Well, the other explanations could be what I said earlier, that somehow or other in the previous election in 2020, there were a lot of additional votes that were
Okay, there's
that
a third
were
possibility.
counted that were not accurate,
Third
and they
possibility.
inflated the numbers for Biden. Who knows?
But there were 60 some odd court cases that
I know.
looked at
We
various
talked about
possible
all this before.
explanations and came
We
up
started
with
off the program
nothing.
talking about this and we're back to the same spot 55 minutes later.
Well, again, if you're using the idea that a whole bunch of people didn't stay home, which is, I personally think, is the most logical
Well, good.
explanation.
I'm glad you think that.
Yeah.
I'm not disputing that.
Okay.
Think it all you want. It's not going to change anything.
Well, it will change something from the postmortem point of view. Instead of saying we need to do X, Y, and Z, one of the obvious things is we need to find the people who didn't vote and find out why and correct that problem. I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent. I tend to vote Democratic, but I'm an independent, as are you, Chuck. So it's important from the point of view of understanding what happened. Okay? By the way, another piece that just occurred to me, we were talking about Tracy Gabbard being the Tulsi, sorry, being the intelligence czar. Supposedly Russian television is very, very excited and happy about that. So
You get that straight from Moscow information?
I got that from people.
From Putin? Putin to get a phone right to you?
I got it from people whose job it is to keep track of that. I did
okay.
not see it myself.
And it's the fact. It's a fact. It's not misinformation, disinformation, or whatever the other information is. Malinformation.
Well,
He got an email from Putin.
Yeah, I'm sure.
and my
that
next door neighbor is from Russia, so he translated it for me.
Paul was really a Russian spy there next to me.
Oh, okay.
But I just want to bring back the same 2 points. Number one, that Harris did not get enough time to solidify her message. She
And
did
whose
not
fault
get
was
to.
that?
Pardon me.
Whose fault was that?
So I'm not pointing fingers. I'm just saying that is a fact that she did not get enough time to solidify her message, listen to the voters, and then create a message that would be relevant and resonate with voters, and that would have brought voters out. And that's the story what I go with. Trump had 4 years, and he caught hold of message that resonated. That's it.
I think if Harris had more time, she would have got less votes.
I don't know that.
I don't either, but I speculate. I'm speculating.
My speculation.
I think she was going backwards.
Can I ask you a question? When I said
No.
Harris had some very specific
No.
proposals, I'm
No.
going to ask it anyway. You
said-
don't have to answer.
you
Well,
said-
yeah,
you
you do
said-
have to answer. I better come through the screen and make you answer. Harris had some very specific proposals for dealing with middle class issues, tax credits.
Very vague question. Very vague statements.
Okay.
That had some real holes in them.
Did you hear her speak and make those proposals?
That on what proposal?
Did you, Chuck Beauregard, hear? We're done?
1 minute.
Okay.
I don't have to answer it. Program's over.
Okay.
What
Doesn't
is
matter
your
whether the
question?
program's over.
Right.
What is
Did you
your
hear,
question?
Did you hear Harris?
They hit Harris about what?
About the proposals for tax credits for various things. Were you aware
yes,
of that?
I did. I did, yes.
Okay. Because I question whether, in fact, a lot of the people who said I was better off before uh, heard those proposals.
They were all
Because
bad ideas.
I don't know. When I was young and foolish and buying my first house,
That's a wrap, guys.
okay, thank you. It
So-
would have
so
been
you'd
kind
be
of nice
happy
to
to get
have
the-
that tax credit.
You'd like to get the $25,000 you was talking about.
It would have been nice. I didn't get it.
You don't think the builder or the seller would raise the price $25,000 before you had a chance to? When you got that money, they're going to inflate the price even higher.
Only if there were a bunch of people who wanted that same house. They don't raise the $25,000 everybody gets. All houses go up. Some
Yeah, how do
houses
you
you
know?
can't
They may
sell
very well
for.
have done it that way.
Huh?
They may have very well done it that way.
Neither one of us.
We're going to give everybody who wants to buy a new house $25,000. So all the sellers say, all right, my house is now worth $25,000 more, so you have to pay me $25,000 over my original asking price.
Well, number one, it wasn't everybody who wants to buy a new house. It's first-time house buyers.
Right, but I'm just saying that because I want to get through this quickly.
All right. But the key is we're a lot more specifics than you're giving her credit for. People don't have babies because somebody's going to give them a $6,000 tax credit. They have babies because they have babies. And one of the things is that, again,
Some people do that. They have babies. That's what the bigger problem with some of the underprivileged communities, people, when the government started for welfare, the more kids you had, the more money you could get, going back to into the 60s and 70s. So, anyways, I'm done. You guys got to be tired. I'm tired. I'm done.
okay, we'll see you
Good
later.
night, everybody.
Take it easy.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye. See you next week.
All righty. It's been a long day. So we didn't. It was a lively conversation. I don't know what we accomplished, if anything. But by the way, there's a guy who I would like to invite, assuming that he's willing to do it. He's a Greek who was born and raised in Egypt, has a PhD in engineering, by the way. Came to the United States, I think for education, certainly, but he stayed. And he's an interesting background, kind of a fun guy to talk to. Pretty good, and you? Oh, hi.
Yeah, you're off the air. Are they
Yeah,
still on
yeah,
there?
yeah, you can turn off that thing.
They're
Okay.
gone. They're gone.
No, take your time.
Oh, hold on for 1 second.
You, oh,
I always don't get a chance to say thank you.
how they won.
Yeah.
What?
He just threw to Eckler and Eckler dropped it. And he threw it right in his hands. And it's Eckler, you wouldn't expect that,
Yeah.
you know. This is a bad drop. I know, that's what I'm having that same struggle.
Happy birthday, Todd.
Yeah, thanks. See you tomorrow, Chris.